Hi all. So what I will try and do is for big chunks of work I'll kind of do a 10-15 minute video. It might be 2, 3, 4 in a session, so you can work through stuff at your own pace. So the first thing to do is to watch this video. All the videos are on our file. Okay, this one is called Curious Split Brain, and this will show you about someone who was born with a split brain, so you can see the issue that they have in everyday life. So pause the video, find this video, the Curious Brain one, and watch that, and then come back. Okay, the Sperry study. So this is me kind of going through this. The most important thing to remember is left hemisphere, right hemisphere. Remember, it switches over in the eyes and the hands. So if the right hand or the right visual field sees or touches something, it goes to the left. If the left hand or the left visual field sees or touches something, it goes to the right. If you remember that, results of this study are very simple. So, as we know, this is the first piece of work into kind of what the brain does. So this is the aim was to study the psychological effects of hemisphere deconnection in order to understand the functions of the left and right hemisphere. Obviously, they cared a lot more about the left brain, as we thought that did loads more. So this is, like I said, the first piece of research on really humans, looking at what regions of the brain do, and the regions of the brain are left and right hemisphere, because that's all we knew when this study was done. So this study is a quasi-experiment / a case study. Quasi because the IV was naturally occurring. Sperry did not manipulate this. The sample were from Vogel and Bogen's experiments for their epilepsy, so this is naturally occurring. Okay, so, and then the DV is what they measured. So could they name things? Could they recall it? Could they move things with their hands? Could they draw things? But we'll come on to that. So it's not kind of strictly a quasi because we don't have the comparison group in the research. So it's a bit like milligrams, but we're just assuming that people without a split brain can do everything perfectly, in which we can. Okay. It can be seen to be a case study because we investigated these 11 people in quite a lot of detail about what they could or could not do. So the exam board are completely happy if you say it's a quasi or a case study. They might ask you in 1 year, they actually asked you why it was both. So no problem. So the actual sample itself, 11 of the 24 patients, okay, they were both male and female. However, they were all right-handed. We know they had the split brain because of their epilepsy, so there's kind of controls. This obviously has some issues because maybe it was down to the drugs that have affected their brains more than the epilepsy. So we always have to be careful here about kind of assuming these people are normal apart from their epilepsy, because the drugs may have done something to their brains. I doubt it, but you don't know. So the first thing I want you to do, or the next thing, is to watch the video called Sperry 1 Joe. This is a guy who's had this experiment, and you can see some of the experiments that we'll look at now done on someone who can't do it, and you'll find it very interesting. So pause this and watch Joe. So the experiment itself, there were 4 different types of tasks. We've got visual tasks, so could you see stuff? Or what you saw, could you name it and draw it? If you felt something, so tactile, could you feel it, could you name it, could you draw it? You then had visual and tactile together, and then lastly a test on what the hell goes on in the right hemisphere, because they had no idea. So we need to know about the procedure of all these. So what happened was, as in Joe, they were asked to fixate at a dot. This was because in this time it wasn't done on a video or a computer, it was done on like an old-fashioned slide machine. It's like a projector, and so they're asked to focus on that kind of fixation point, and something would get flashed up either to the left visual field or the right visual field. And remember, it was only flashed for 1/10 of the seconds, and that assured that the whole eye couldn't look at it, because as soon as the whole eye looks at something, both visual fields would see it, so it would go to both parts of the brain. So they had just to flash it to ensure that only one visual field saw the picture. Okay. You can kind of if we were in class now, we'd be doing quite a few kind of experiments to kind of show you this. But for example, just for you to try and remember, to help you remember stuff. Okay, if you're looking at that dot and I flashed up the $sign, what hemisphere would that go into? The right. Okay, because it's in my left visual field, goes to my right hemisphere. Okay, good. So that must mean that the question mark goes to the left. So what you want to do now is, which one would you be able to say, if they were both flashed up at the same time, which one would you say you saw? Think about where your language is. Well, yes, language is left. So it must be in what was in my right visual field. So if they were both flashed up, we'd only say we saw the question mark. Okay, and that's what they basically found. Okay, so when the image was presented only to the right visual field, they could name the image, because that's where language is. However, when it went to the left visual field, they couldn't name it. However, like Joe, if they were asked to draw it with their left hand, they could then draw it, and once they saw what they drew, they could then name it. Really clever. The second load of tests are tactile tests. So this is feeling stuff. Okay, so what I want you to do now is pause me and watch Sperry too. You want to meet this lady who's had this operation, part of Vogel and Bogan's slot, and see her trying to name things that she's holding. It is insanely crazy that she can't, and it shows you the difficulty that they would have if you ever just held stuff. So, as you kind of saw there, they couldn't see the hands, okay, and then they had to verbally identify what was in their hand, okay. So if it was placed in the right hand only, they could feel it, they could then name it because it goes to their left language hemisphere. However, if it was in their left hand, okay, no idea, they'd feel it and go, yeah, what was that? I don't know what it is it sharp, is it round, is it square? I don't know. They've got no words. They've got it. It's just nothing. Just words aren't there. So they then kind of combined these two things. Okay, so what they would do is they would flash an image to either the left or right visual field, and then their hands not being able to see, they're a bit like a cover there. They would then, with one of their hands, try and find the object. So if something went to their right visual field, their right hand would be able to find it, but not the left hand, because remember, it doesn't cross over. Okay, so pretty obvious kind of results there. Okay, because the hemispheres work in deconnection, they're not connected, they can't communicate. But as soon as, like, for example, you said, oh, it was a ball, they'd be able to do it, because then both ears and brains would hear it. So the last thing they kind of did was to then go, what does the right hemisphere do? And they weren't sure. So they kind of did loads of tests, but one of the main ones were that they presented shapes, okay, to the right hemisphere, and then nude pictures were flashed to the left visual field only. Okay, so remember, it's being flashed to the left. Okay, it goes to the right. No words. So the shapes would go into both, but the nude pictures only to one. I hope you like my nude pictures. Okay, and then they kind of did these kind of tests. What did you see and stuff like that, and they were then asked if they saw anything other than the geometric shapes. Okay, and this was what really funny. The participants blushed and giggled and seemed completely embarrassed. Okay, but they had no idea that they'd seen anything. They couldn't explain their laughter whatsoever. Okay, they could say that they saw different shapes like spheres, cones, okay, that kind of stuff, but they had no idea that they'd seen the nude pictures at all. So Sperry concluded three things. Firstly, the language is necessary to recognise and name objects, obviously, but it was like bleh, nothing was there. Okay, and language is found in the left hemisphere. Okay, and kind of probably the most importantly, really, is that each hemisphere has its own memory and consciousness. So they are two separate antibodies, and they're disconnected by the corpus callosum. So if you don't have that, they operate completely by themselves and can do everything. Okay. So what I'd like you to do now is evaluate it. So find a piece of paper, or if you've been able to print off the booklet, do it on there. So these are the 7 headings we always evaluate research on. And can you come up with a pro and con, or at least one for each of the method or of each heading? So research method, the type of data, quantitative, you either could or couldn't do it. Okay, it's not behaviours really. Could you do it? Could you not do it? Validity, think face or ecological. Reliability, was it standardised? Ethical issues, fine. Okay, and then stuff about the sample and ethnocentrism. Okay, so have a go at doing this. Yeah, like the study's pretty good. Like it's kind of an all right one. So yeah, have a go at doing that. If you've got any questions, just ask me. Okay. You should have evaluated all the other 4 studies by now, so you should know kind of what you're doing. So the next task is the 2 kind of linking studies bit. So first of all, how does Sperry link to the key theme? So in the booklet, again, you should be kind of just used to doing this with all the other studies. Okay, so define the key theme, which is regions of the brain. So looking at what part of the brain controls what behaviour. What does Sperry do to test this? Left and right hemisphere. And then what did he find? And then regions of brain. I'd link that back to language being in the left. Okay, so answer that question. So pause me and answer that. And then the next kind of question is, how does Sperry link to the biological area? So what is the principle of the biological area? So this is on the introduction PowerPoint on that first or second slide, but it's the idea that your behaviour is controlled by your biology, and in this case our brain. So if your brain can't do it, you can't do it. Okay, so it's obviously looking at the kind of impact of hemispheres and the corpus callosum, and then kind of just link that back. So you should be more than familiar with those. If you want me to check any of these, just send them in and I'll check that they're right. I'm sure they will be because you follow the steps. It's quite hard not to, but if you're not certain, yell. Okay, and then the last thing I want you to do about the Sperry study right now is to take a Kahoot. I will put the link up on our page and set it as a challenge for you, and I will see how well you've done, and that will inform me of what I need to kind of recap in our next session as well. Okay, so do that. Hopefully you've done all this work, and now can you please go on to the third PowerPoint video in this folder for me. Okay, thank you.